Right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Metaphysical Insights. And excuse me for being a minute or two late, but I've been visiting already with my fantastic guests. I have Matt Pike and Tim Robey, both of um, Wiltshire, Stonehenge, Salisbury, Tim, South Africa. These two gentlemen have a wealth of history and archaeology and stories and writing and you name it. So we're going to have a good conversation. Uh, Matt, it was or still is, I guess, the writer in residence at Stonehenge. And did I get that right?
Well,
And
yeah, yeah.
and and Tim's got several blog posts out on some fantastic history. And this, it's a must read. And we'll make sure we have all that
Got
stuff up.
mine with me today.
Good, good. And we'll make sure we have all this up. Matt's also been part of some fantastic video projects dealing with history and tours. And, we can kind of chat about how all that's going. But also, you know, the book starts getting more into some of the metaphysical aspects too of the time and the people. And you're showing some of the idea of transmission of metallurgy into Britain
Hmm.
from basically the Celts, it sounds like, from what I'm picking up so far. And I mean, just all of it and the magic behind it. That's all a fascinating piece, too. As long as I don't know, I get lost because there's so much at that place and in that area and the history that you guys live in. I'm so jealous. I don't think I'd ever be bored, but um, mm-mm. So I don't know. Who, what's What's it like over there, just in general? I'm not trying to get political or anything else, but how are you guys surviving? I know right now you're in a heat wave, um, all the rest of it, and
Hmm.
anything else you want to add to the introduction I made, you know. So,
Uh, I'm sort of fairly happy. I can talk to you about the spiritual side of the book. That we can talk about Stonehenge and the spiritual side of that. The
mhm,
weather here, as you know, is hot. Um, it's still hot tonight. I reckon it must be up in the high twenties. What's that? The high seventies. Here
okay,
even now in this room.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's been a hot day, but we've been waiting a long time to have them. We've had about a month of really rubbish weather, where it's been fairly cold and miserable and raining a lot of
send
the
it to
time.
us.
So, I, having grown up in Africa, I'm really happy with this. You know,
Mhm,
I can relate to this weather, and I just feel I've come into my own,
mhm,
even though I'm not acclimatized anymore. But I still
right,
enjoy it.
and you can laugh at everybody else that's wilting around you.
I
Well,
do tend I do tend to be energized from it, strangely
Okay,
enough, until it gets too hot.
yeah,
Robey One has been, sorry, Tim. I have a nickname for him. I'm afraid after years of working with the Stones, but Tim and I are both very used to standing out in all weathers. To be honest with you,
hmm,
and as much as the sun is wonderful. I've seen a very sodden Tim in the field as much as I. Um,
yeah,
and
Mm.
but to be honest, this is like Tim says, it's the first proper roaster we've had for a
right.
little while. So yeah, a proper. I'm glad to grab it. And I know how in Oregon, where you are, William. It's been absolutely insanely hot, hasn't it? It's been
Oh yeah, and
you know,
we're in a 20-year drought cycle still. I mean, who knows when it's going to end? So yeah, we've had two brush fires within a couple miles of my house already this year,
well,
and a couple others in town that you know we just you do what you can do and hope that people wake up and realize that we need to do something about climate change.
Mm.
And I'm not meaning to get political, but I mean, there's a lot out there that we just need to pay attention to some experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're fine. We're in agreement with you there, William. One of the things talking about, come back to Tim's wonderful book, is the journey. So when someone writes a book, they sort of come up with a vision and they talk to their friends about it and they share bits and pieces. And every now and then I've been very lucky where Tim has shared his sort of story and his vision as he's gone through it, and some of the trials and tribulations with it. And it remains wonderful that you've done it, mate. Well done. You've created a book, like a proper grown-up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from first thinking of it to actually getting it on sale last year, it was 4 years.
Yeah,
certainly, maybe closer to 5. Because when I first thought about it, it was just I want to write this idea that I've got about Stonehenge as the centre of the world. I want to write that up somehow, and I just couldn't get away to do it because there's no way to pin down archaeological evidence. And being an archaeologist, as you're a historian, Matt, you need that backup evidence to feel happy in yourself.
Yeah.
And the evidence is just scattered all over the world, and you pull in little bits of it from here and there and everywhere, but there's nothing to actually pin it to Stonehenge. There's nothing to pin it to this bit of the world. And I began to despair of actually being able to write a paper or do some research on it. And then I just thought, why don't I just write a blooming novel? Because then I can say exactly what I want. And if anybody says to me, well, you can't prove that, I can say, well, it's a novel, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was to just try and create an image of what it was like there, and to try and tell a story at the same time. Tell a story of my favourite character, the Amesbury Archer, and tell a story about what I saw as Stonehenge. And it took me about 2.5 years to actually get to that point.
Okay.
And I was talking to somebody about the Amesbury Archers up on the stones. The Amesbury Archer singular, stones plural. It is hot.
Right. Yes.
and I was just telling him about it and sort of saying, this guy would have been a metal worker. He'd have been one of the first metal workers in this country. They'd have been seen as magic.
Right.
This guy chucks a load of rock into the fire, stirs it round, doesn't come out as a pot. It comes out as this shining metal, this shining stuff that's totally transformed. And we know from other cultures that the way these people smelt is by ritual, is very much by rote. You learn chants, you learn songs, you learn counts, and you do everything the right amount of time, and you check the temperature by the colour of the flame if it's there at all. All this sort of stuff is all done by learning what you see. There's nothing written down. There's nothing that anybody else can access unless they're actually into the magic. And it's
Right.
magic for everyone else. And they were magicians. They must have been seen as magicians. And I've always said it's very interesting that the Bronze Age is in the Bronze Age in Northern Europe, where all this is happening, is one of the things that comes up are these strange gold caps. There are now about 4 or 5 of them known from Germany and Poland and down on the Danube. Usually in gold, obviously designed to be worn, and they've got all over them. They've got stars and suns and moons, and as soon as you see something like that and you put it on somebody's head, you think wizard.
Right.
And I really wonder, ever since I've seen those, I've really wondered whether that idea of a wizard and a person with a robe maybe and a flowing and a big conical hat goes right the way back to the Bronze Age. You can't prove it. You can't say anything like that. My character never wears a conical hat. He's not into that kind of thing. But it was happening, and these people were magicians. They produced magic. They produced something that nobody else had ever seen and nobody understood, and it's what we define as magic.
Yeah.
And
I don't think they. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that's fine. Go.
When I read this and I look at history, and I don't have the background you guys have by any means. I've been too much of a generalist in my life, but I think that the people doing the work, transforming the stone into metal, probably consider it magic and themselves magicians as well. You talk about that in the book, but I think it would be accurate because they don't know the chemistry, they don't know the physics behind it. I wouldn't think they're every bit as smart as we are, but their thinking and their focus was different. I would think those things hadn't been invented up here yet. They had been in the Middle East, maybe, but not here.
William, I was going to say that I've had the pleasure of making bronze with a chap called Neil Burridge, who turned up at Stonehenge and demonstrated production of bronze, and it was one of the most magical experiences. And for once, I managed to get off from my normal duties, and I worked with him for about 5 hours. And it's like Tim says, there's a rhythm to it. So he tried to be as authentic as he could be, and we had two, if I remember correctly, it was 2 pig's bladders or something like that, and there were sticks attached to them, and there was a rhythm that I had to keep the temperature up, and just as Tim says, the color of the flame, the glow of the flame, that the intensity of that would indicate its temperature. Although I think we did use a thermal couple, but there's the idea of creating bronze, even now, even when you watch someone do it, is magical. It blows your mind. And there's this. I'll never forget the moment where, and sadly, my dagger was stolen quite recently from me at Stonehenge. But
no,
yeah, you didn't know about this. It's true, but
no, that's terrible.
No, it's another story, but we won't get into that. But yes, we worked together to work on this bronze dagger, and as he broke this clay mold, which it had been poured into, it made this shring, this ring that is unmistakably quality metal. And before, it was bits of what looked like rubbishy stone, and it was hard to believe he'd done that. And he was explaining to me the purity of the stone that would have been found in the Neolithic and before would have been so much better than what we have now, because all the best stuff's been grabbed. So now we have tin mines doing, excavating vast areas to get a small percentage of tin from it. But back then, it's quite possible that you might find an ore with like 40% purity just lying on the surface. Wow. And as time goes over, that gets picked up, certainly in areas like Cornwall and that sort of stuff. That's how it was explained to me. And very briefly, one other thing Neil said to me about African metals, and he said that there was something called anarsic copper. Anarso copper. Do you know anything about that, Tim? Where it's got
arsenic copper. Arsenic.
There's sort of already an alloy almost before you even try to heat them up, so you end up with this super. But Tim could probably tell you more about that.
Yeah, it's just not a trace element, a minor element in the copper ore. So that when you smelt the copper, arsenic we all think of it as rat poison, but it's actually a metal or a pseudo metal. So it behaves like a metal, and it melds with the copper, and it forms something which is much harder than copper on itself. So it works like bronze. The difference is that bronze is much better if you can use tin, because bronze is malleable. You can shape it, whereas arsenic copper is strong but brittle.
Okay, that makes
sense. It tends to break.
Okay.
But when they realised that they could get this arsenic, arseno copper, then they would have chosen those sources until they came up with tin. And I was reading something quite recently that it's quite possible that it was actually in Britain that the Bronze Age came into being, where they actually they had enough tin because there are only about 3 or 4 good sources of tin in the whole of Europe, and Cornwall is one of them. And once the Copper Age got down to Cornwall, and people were looking around, and they recognized something about cassiterite, that it was the same sort of rock, or maybe they just experimented, and they came up with this shining silvery stuff, and they thought, well, let's mix it together, and Bob's your auntie, and they had a they had bronze, and the actual spread of bronze is very rapid. The spread of the Copper Age takes thousands of years, but the spread of bronze is apparently very rapid. I didn't know this until, well, I'm still not absolutely certain that it's right, but this is what I was reading something about 2 weeks ago. I'm afraid I can't remember who on earth was writing it. But yeah, it's just possible. It's just possible that at least for this part of Europe, the Bronze Age began in Britain.
That's fascinating. And I've heard theories that the styles and such that were used in the decoration of bronze and such may have come from Britain, even if the metal hadn't. I watch too much Time Team, so they've got some good history in there. I think I question some of the archaeology. I think Tim would know better, but I do. You can learn about history, and reading about the areas, it sounds like they had the bronze in the Middle Eastern areas, the Mesopotamian areas, quite a bit earlier. But I also remember hearing, too, that they had the copper that was harder. So whereas in England, the Copper Age was so short, most of what I've read doesn't even talk about it. It talks mostly about the bronze instead of the transition. But over growing up and studying history, and even what I read now, the long Copper Age in the Middle East, and then that change. And I mean, shoot, they were using copper tools on the pyramids, if I remember right. And
I think
it's
so,
interesting.
Yeah.
And I have heard that if I remember right, I've heard that the tin for the Middle Eastern copper some of it at least could have come from Cornwall, because trade routes were going back thousands of years. From my understanding, I don't know. You guys,
I think that's what this guy was trying to say, and as I say, I can't for the life of me remember who it was. Something I was reading online, and I shall have to look it up.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know how much credence to give it, to be honest. It's something that's just sort of coming into the melting pot now, and maybe in 10 years' time, archaeologists work fairly slowly about these sorts of things. Maybe in 10 years' time, we'll have a definitive answer.
Right, and historians do too, and I'm grateful that the newest idea doesn't become the newest fact without due diligence. Part of my fascination with history is how much what we know changes over time. And I mean, where you guys have been working, Stonehenge, look at how much the idea of what that place was for, who founded it, has changed, even in our lifetimes, let alone modern history and ancient. I mean,
I think Stonehenge is almost overinterpreted in some ways, and that's the problem.
It's almost over in what?
Overinterpreted.
Okay.
It's like so many people have looked at it and analysed it and reanalyzed it and written books and thesis and done digs and that's one of the things that's fascinating, but also one of the things that kind of is a little bit frustrating, because I've got, to my right hand side, no word of exaggeration, I've got 50 books about Stonehenge.
Oh, I believe it.
And there are, some of them are fantastic, some of them are fantastical, and all of them are relevant. But yeah, it's a wonder. That's what kind of has always kept me so enthused about Stonehenge, is the fact that I'm never going to get bored, because I'm always going to have another story I can look into, I can talk to people about. But there's a lot of bad history around Stonehenge, I think. personally. There's and it can be frustrating because you will meet people on a daily basis who will quote very bad history to you, or indifference, or conspiracy theories, or and I don't know everything about Stonehenge. I've spent far too much of my time possibly looking into and learning about Stonehenge, but I love the subject, and I find myself enthused about it. But ultimately, there's so much stuff about it, William, that I always find that, I mean, we all have trigger questions that wind us up when we work at the Stonehenge. Can we talk about this, Robey? You're right. You're all right. I'm still employed currently there. So, but we all have questions which people would come up to you, and you'd hear it so many times, and it's very difficult to keep yourself enthused in answering that question with a certain sort of zigger. Like, what a great question. And I found myself, when I first got there, finding it quite tiresome to talk about things like ley lines, and that's what I just wanted to talk about social history and the importance and the relevance of the stones in that context.
Right.
However, I've worked there long enough, and I'm long enough in the tooth there to know it's really important to know about the ley lines, and it's nice to be able to talk to people about ley lines, and people go there for all sorts of different reasons. But I think the one that me and Tim have probably heard the most is that a concrete repair, or is that some kind of hole in the stone? Because the nearest point you are at stone on the path where we stand, generally, it gives you plain line of sight to a very obvious and the only clumsy repair, really, that's visible of Stonehenge.
Right.
You probably answer that question on a good day 10 to 15 times a day. On a bad day, maybe up to 100, to be honest with you. But you can't lose that enthusiasm talking about it, and that it's exciting. But Tim, is there anything that you particularly didn't like talking to people about? Be honest now.
I think I'd agree with you. A lot of the time, it was when people talked about ley lines, or it was aliens. You know, what really used to get me was someone would say, "So what about this? Was it aliens?" And you say, "Well, okay," and you launch into your explanation, and you go on and you talk to them for 10 minutes.
Right.
And at the end, they walk away and say, "So it was aliens then." and you want to pick up one of those stakes and just hit them with it.
I know. I get so frustrated with that. Why people have to think the human race is so stupid we can't figure these things out ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it amounts to, I think. Yeah.
All right. There's a lot of Captain Caveman with Stonehenge. So I mean, my kids don't know of Captain Caveman, but when I remember watching, I think they're probably Hanna-Barbera cartoons or something where Ooga Booga, and he's got a big, and he's like running around with this big. And I think that was kind of, quite honestly, how I was educated in some ways about the Stone Age. I was just like, guys are running around dragging people by hair and wearing loincloths and Ooga Booga, Ooga Booga.
Yeah.
And that is, and if you compare the timelines with Stonehenge to, we were talking about the pyramids earlier. You got the Great Pyramid of Giza, and this fantastic structure,
which is late compared to Mesopotamian pieces.
Absolutely, but they're contemporaneous, and that's the thing. This is the guys who are building Stonehenge are in the same era as the people who are building these wonderful monuments, and I think I get frustrated by that. I was talking to some school kids recently, and we don't have hieroglyphs. We don't have this written memory. Maybe they wrote things down on trees, carved things. I don't know. It's frustrating. We have carvings on the stones, but we don't have that permanence. Maybe Stonehenge marks that permanence. Maybe building something out of stone is that permanence, but
it's not a written language per se that we
with each other. Yeah, we mustn't underestimate the guys and girls and kids and possibly Oryx or whatever was helping build Stonehenge.
I totally agree with you about the the sort of idea that they must have been putting things down on something impermanent. You know, you look at Stonehenge now, particularly the Sarsen circle and the horseshoe, and it's so carefully planned. And I'm a pictorial person myself. I sort of map things and I draw plans in my head, and everything's a picture, and I can't see how they could actually plan that thing out without putting it on something, putting it on paper, as it were, doing some drawings. They don't have to have writing or anything fancy like that. They don't have to have pictographs, but they do need to be able to visualize what they're looking at. And they also, the other thing is they need a sense of scale. Not everybody in the world has a sense of scale. I mean, we all know this. You meet people who just have no sense of scale. But you do get whole societies who don't have a sense of scale. And I remember being quite stunned when I was studying anthropology at university to find out that some of the pygmy tribes, I won't say all of them, but a couple that were studied in the Congo area, have no sense of mapping. They cannot look at a map and say, oh yeah, that's my landscape. There I am. That's where I've got to go to. Even if you draw them a map, they don't understand what you're doing, because their stuff, the things that they need, their resources are so evenly distributed across the landscape. It doesn't really matter whether you go along that path or the one next to it, or whether you go down this valley or the one next to it. It really doesn't matter, because you're going to find the food that you need. You're going to find the leaves that you need and the branches you need and the stone that you need, and whatever you need is scattered all across the Congo Basin in a fairly even there. And so they kind of get, the group gets together and says, it's time we moved. Which way should we go? And they decide on a direction and they go. And they've only got the vaguest knowledge of no, that's not true. They've got a knowledge of their landscape. They know where they're going on the landscape. But because there's no need to pass it to somebody else or to describe something so that you don't miss it, they don't have any sense of scaling stuff down. There's the landscape. You just turn to someone and say, we're going to walk 2 days in that direction and half a day in that direction. And when we get there, we'll walk half a day in another direction, and then when we get to the river, we'll walk up the river, and that's about the best directions you'll get. They cannot then show you that, represent that on a drawing, or even in the sand, or describe it in terms of turning left, right, and all those sorts of directions. They just can't do that. It's because it's unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah, come with me. I'll show you the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
The landscape map is up here, but they don't have the language to, or they haven't developed the language to describe it, because they don't need to. Whereas,
and I would imagine it changes all the time too, depending on where's rain coming from, what season it is.
I guess, yes, true.
Who else is there looking for the same resources? I mean, so I would think it would be more impermanent than setting up an astrology temple, where you have to know that over time that spot is going to be where the sun rises or the sun sets on this day. And I mean, and you can't just figure that out in a year. I would think they would have to either have some kind of, even a small stone marking a spot, oral tradition, and some kind of, I can't imagine not having something to lay out to visualize it.
So William, excuse my lack of geographical knowledge, but in Oregon, how much is the difference between your summer and your winter sunset? Do you know what I mean? So where we are in southern England, we have, well, for instance, tonight it was dark about 10 o'clock. tonight, something like that. It finally sort of got dark. But when we come to winter solstice, it's around about 4 o'clock, 10 to 4, something like that. I forget now. So we have this vast difference in the sunset time and the effective use of the day you have. And we don't really know how much use of the night they had in the Neolithic. I mean, when you had a full moon, I'm sure that was a hunter's moon and all that sort of stuff. But when it gets dark and cold, it's pretty dark and cold. So I often say to people who visit Stonehenge, where we are in this part of the globe, we have this massive difference, and Stonehenge is marking the extremities of those points. It's marking when it's the darkest of darkest and longest of long nights. So when it's shortest and that is something that's got to be useful, and it still is useful in many ways, but it's marking it with, like we said earlier, this permanence, this forever nature.
Yes.
And I mean, there's a lot of talk of Woodhenge and the purpose of Woodhenge, and in some ways that's kind of lost to us, but we don't really know how tall the poles, the posts were, or whether they're totemed and that sort of stuff. We know that there's an alignment that appears to be reversed to Stonehenge, but with Stonehenge, it's built out of stone. It still works now. However, it's shifted a few degrees or whatever, and it will shift back over time because it is, let's face it, nearly 5,000 years old. But I've always thought that seems to be almost like the ticking clock of the year, of the sun, to where we are now. And I guess my understanding has changed lots over the years, and I certainly am not the grand master of Stonehenge and all of its understanding. I would never claim to be. But when you work there as much as myself and Tim has, it's very hard not to notice the length of the shadows and the movement of the sun across the horizon, which is open and vast. It's Salisbury Plain after all.
Right.
And you see it moving through these wondrous arcs over our heads this time of year. And as we get closer and closer to the fall and the winter, it barely skirts above the horizon and just dips down. It's it has a real majesty about it in that way. But whether our ancestors were trying to tell us that, I don't know if we know that, but it certainly marks that. It shows that. There's no denying that's what it shows. But
and maybe it's just trying to say, okay, it's time to come in for tea, but it works this other way.
Maybe just a party. I don't know. There's a wonderful thing that Timothy Darville, in one of his talks he gave at Stonehenge Visitor Centre a few years ago, and he was talking about the numeracy of how many stones we have at Stonehenge, and how we have 30 upright sarsens and 30 lintels on top. How we have the 5 trilithons, which are literally 3 stones, and he gave this wonderful spiel about how it would, if you took them as 30 plus 30 and then had 3 feast days and you worked around the monument in this way, it would almost mirror 365 days of the year, which is a beautiful and lovely story, but really doesn't hold up all that much, as sadly, because it would need to be 29.5 days. But there's not a million, but there's tens and tens of theories about Stonehenge that can enthuse you. But I don't know, Tim, have you got a favourite?
Yeah, it's in my book.
That's what I thought you'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go for Stonehenge as a place where they were exploring the stars. They weren't studying the stars from there. That had been done. What Stonehenge was set up was so that they would know when things were happening. I think they're an awful. I know Simon will eat me alive next time we go for a drink, but you know, I think this all the alignments that you get at Stonehenge. You know, you can make alignments once you've got a forest of post holes and pits and stones of different sorts and scattered all over the place. That with that density, you can make alignments to almost anything.
Right.
And I think a lot of them you have to cut out, but there are some absolutely indisputable ones there, and they were certainly using them to tell the passing of the year. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I did, when it starts getting down to counting days and you know and as you say, 365 days in the year, they didn't need to know that. They really didn't need to know that. What they needed to know was that at this time, the days are going to start getting longer.
Right.
At this time, we are about to go into our coldest, darkest spell of winter. It's going to be frozen and miserable, and we can't do anything. So batten down the hatches. We've got 2 moons, and then maybe things will start getting better. And then we've got to get it ploughed, and then we've got the growing season. I talked about mapping and scarce resources. We do have scarce resources up here. The further north you go,
Right.
those resources are daylight and warmth for growing crops. Once you're an agriculturist, your scarce resource is not the availability of the crop, but getting the crop in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will engender the same kind of mental process that allows people to draw plans and maps and make plans and record them so that they can actually organize things. And getting back to the point that I was making ages ago was I think that there was definitely a plan drawn for Stonehenge, even if it was just drawn in the dirt. There was a plan drawn, and everybody knew exactly what the finished product was going to look like before they ever started.
It seems like. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say it probably didn't end up quite looking like that because they were, after all, British, and we never seem to end up with what we start out thinking about. But you know.
Well, Tim, I got asked the question by some school children a couple of days ago. How long did it take to build Stonehenge? And I've always hated that question. So here we are. I'm going to field it at you now. How long did it take to build Stonehenge?
See this piece of string? Yeah, it could have been built in 15 years.
Right.
That's literally. Well, we know that the bank and ditch, and as far as I'm concerned, the bluestones were all brought here 500 years before the Sarsen temple was built.
Right.
So they were already there and available. But bringing the stones in, putting them together, you know, it would be quite feasible for a small tribal society, 4,000 or 5,000 people, under one political unit or under some sort of similar obligation, because there's a lot of talk about there not being a central political hierarchy, but being a community project. This is very popular at the moment. And as long as you've got 4,000 or 5,000 people together, you get a workforce of a few hundred together at any one time. And given that, you could fairly easily pull 5 stones a year from Westwards, isn't it? Westwards to Salisbury Plain and to Stonehenge. To dress them would take you 6, 8 months, 9 months, and then 3 to 5 days to put each one in the ground. So you're looking at maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks to put your 5 stones, set your 5 stones up. Yeah. All achievable within a year. 5 stones a year, 15 years, you're more or less there. There's 45 stones. Yeah, 15 years, you're easily there.
Fantastic.
And do you reckon the observations though? So what's that cycle? It's I forget now. 18.61 years for a complete station stone cycle. What is it? The lunar cycle is what I'm no. So from the east to west. So it always blows my mind because somebody must have set out the mission in the first place to create this monument.
Yeah. Well, don't forget we start out with the station stone and a nice flat area, which might have been a central meeting area. And at some point they decide that this is a good place to set up a cemetery. So we
Mhm.
build the bank and the ditch with our newfangled religion that we've inherited from Wales or the north or from somewhere on the Irish Sea coast. It's come down here. We set this up. We set up what we now think are the blue stones, 56 of them in a circle, and we start putting our ancestors into the ground, special ancestors into the ground next to them, and that phase lasts for 200 years, 300 years maybe, and that whole time there may be all these timber posts and timber settings being put up. We don't know, because 99% of those timber settings, probably more than that, are undated.
Right.
And there's
Okay.
just a few of them we can say it would be totally impractical for them to have been up when the stones were up. So they must be older than the stones. And it's that kind of dating by inference. But there would have been things happening, other things happening. It's not just a ring of stones with nothing in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
And then 500 years after that first phase, someone then decides to build Stonehenge. That's the bit that could have taken 15 years, but that's to build it. I think it was probably longer than 15 years, but it could have been done as quickly as that.
Yeah.
If nothing went wrong, which it almost certainly did. But the planning stage before that and the decisions to make the temple may have taken, 2 or 3 decades. They may have taken 2 generations. And then once they've got them in, fiddling around with things like the station stones, again, the station stones aren't dated. We don't know whether the station stones were actually part of the setting up of the monument or whether they were added in afterwards, because
Okay.
the idea that the long sight lines that go just past the edges of the circle work both ways. You either set it up big enough so that you can set up a circle within it, and you limit the size of the circle to fit within the square that you've made, or you have the circle and you make the square, the rectangle, sorry, to go round the sides.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
you can't argue it either way, or you can argue it both ways. So we don't know when station stones were set up. The general consensus at the moment is that they were set up after the circle, but there is still quite a sizable consensus that suggests that they were set up as setting up stones.
Okay.
I don't like that theory, because if you wanted to draw diagonals and mark the center point of Stonehenge, that's all very well, but you could do it a dozen other ways. You don't need to put 4 9-ton stones in the ground
That's a good.
to mark it. You can mark that point very quickly and say, there you go, that's our center point. Once you've started putting those stones on the outer circle, you can forget using your center point, because you can't see from those 4 stones, all 4 of those stones, you can't see the whole diagonal.
Okay.
So there's no it doesn't make sense as a setting out procedure, where a few sticks would, a couple of posts in the ground, which you take out afterwards, would do just that.
Right.
So I think it's later, and I think it's to do with, as you said, the setting of the moon, the
Easterly and westerly moon sets.
it's the lunar standstill, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The extremities of it.
That's it. And the major lunar standstill. That's it. Yeah. And yeah, it's a recognition of that. It's a recognition of that. The observation of it would have carried on for hundreds of years beforehand. How long would it take them to set it up? 3 or 4 years to plan it, maybe, if they knew the cycle was coming up anyway. Right? You decide we've got to do something about it this time round. Otherwise, it's not going to be our problem. It's going to be the next generation's problem.
Right.
And they set up over a couple of years. They can set up the date, the lines, get the alignment. They all agree that that's the alignment, and they plonk the 4 stones in, and that could be done within a single year. But how long they actually did the research for, we don't know. It could have been 5 years. It could have been 50. They could have started planning it. How often does this happen? Well, I don't know. It happened 10 years ago. It hasn't been as far south as that since. maybe we should start checking, And so it carries on for 45 years until the next time it comes around. They say, right, well, let's mark this permanently with some stones. Or they might have known it for 1,000 years, and they just wanted to celebrate it. We're never going to know that. Never going to know that.
And I would think, too, the fact that they were able to build it shows that the religion they had become strong enough and powerful enough to unify enough people to believe in the project and be willing to do it, and that the agriculture had gotten going well enough to support that process. Because, I mean, you're spending less time growing food and feeding yourself when you've got that kind of a project going on, I would think. Maybe it doesn't make that much difference, but one of the theories I've read recently is that religion could have been, the need for religion was to, or without religion, you wouldn't have unified a society. You couldn't have had a city without a religion, because you had to have something to draw people who weren't related together with some kind of a common goal and common values. And I mean, it's a theory. I'm not going to, it makes some sense. I'm not going to say it's true, but if there's truth to that, I would think that any kind of a religion, and you're talking about not a unified central authority, so that would mean some kind of a religious authority, I would think, had to be well enough respected and ingrained in people to get them to do this.
How do you get people to conform? How do you get people to do what you want to do? And that's a very interesting question, and almost unanswerable for the time period we're talking about. Conformity, and were the people who built Stonehenge willing to do it and wanting to do it? Was it their dream to create this monument? Were they forced? Were they enslaved? I mean, there's all sorts of theories about that side of things. It would make a very interesting guidebook if it was all about if they went down the enslaved. But we do have a new culture coming in, the beaker culture, don't we, Tim? We have the beaker culture that sort of sweeps through, and beaker culture sort of is almost defined by these ornate and wonderful pots that are found within their burials. Most often, the beaker burials that I know of are Bronze Age burial mounds in the area surrounding Stonehenge. So, are these high status burials of the elite who forced people to build Stonehenge, or that I've read theories that along that line. I'm not saying I believe that, but it's interesting. We have a culture change. We have a huge. We have this. I think the phrase is grooved ware pottery, and then it moves to this new culture. But just like as it is nowadays, some people prefer to be. Oh, good catch, Tim. Some people prefer to be cremated. Some people like to be buried. These things fall in and out of fashion, and for various personal belief structures.
Right.
I've always liked the idea of Woodhenge, the site just off of Stonehenge, being this collective party site where people gather with their tribes and trade, and we have this one point where we're going to meet. Maybe not every year, but every couple of years, we're going to meet up. We're going to make this pilgrimage to Woodhenge. We're going to perhaps the cremated remains of our relatives that we've been carrying with us for all this time. We're going to cast them to the wind at Stonehenge. I don't know. I think I've become a little bit romanticized through my time there about various theories, and maybe a little bit spoiled. But there's no denying it. The archaeological evidence points to people gathering, at least for a small period of time, at Woodhenge and partying, or at least wastefully eating and having what appears to be some kind of celebration event. We have habitation at Durrington Walls. We have a link through the River Avon. And at the bottom of my garden and just beyond I have the River Avon, and I'm pleased to say I found a couple of really decent arrowheads a couple of weeks ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah, really good ones. I can't wait to show them. But this whole area around here, it's like a bowl of really nice habitation. It's really sheltered. It's really nice, even now. And I think that drew our ancestors to this area, this sort of. But I'm no archaeologist. I'm a social historian and a bit of a nerd. So I've learnt a lot from speaking to people who are archaeologists and and reading various books, of which I'm very pleased to say Tim is one of them.
But it's still social history, and we still need it. It's just social prehistory.
Yes.
We
I
still
like
need we need your kind of insight, and that's really, that's one of the nice things about the bunch of people you meet at Stonehenge. It's just this huge range of diverse skills that they had, and I've left EH now, so I can actually say this, but I think the way that English Heritage is going with the staff there is trying to dumb the job down and specialize it and take out that they're not going to attract those the guys. Yeah, I know you can't say anything. It's all right. The guys like you and me and Simon and all the others are going to be less attracted to working for small pay for a job that doesn't have that kind of stimulation anymore, and that means that the information that goes out will be the poorer for it. And I think that's a great shame. It may be a short term blip as well, because it can bounce back in another decade or so.
I hope so, because I mean there was a big push there. Was it what was the name of the archaeological school that they're looking at closing? At one of the universities.
Sheffield.
Yeah,
Sheffield.
Sheffield. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which my understanding is one of the best in the country, and they're wanting to close it down. I don't know what's happened with that.
Well, actually, one of our finest, Susan Greeny, is a graduate of there, I believe, if my memory serves correct. But yeah, it's difficult because heritage is really struggling, and I'm not the. I like Tim says, Stonehenge. I've been very pleased and blessed to be surrounded by very inspirational souls, very knowledgeable people who can inspire you in 100 different directions, 1,000 different directions. And sadly, it's difficult. The things are changing, and that's no criticism of the organisation. It's just the work environment we all find ourselves in now.
Right.
And yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I'm very pleased because I'm blessed because I have time zone and my work with Frog and Ruby, and but I don't believe any of that would have ever happened if it wasn't for, as we pointed out earlier, the interactions and the contacts I made at Stonehenge and the confidence that gave me, and meeting people like Simon Banton and Carol Druce and Tim Dorr, and these incredibly inspirational. Pat Shelley, I worked with Pat Shelley for a while, and it was It really is. It was, to me, it was a massive inspirational sort of university experience at work, and I didn't mind helping people on and off of buses or doing whatever it was, because I was able to say, hey, I was looking at Grinsell. Could you tell me a bit more about that? And I would get that knowledge back, and I would be inspired, and I'd learn, and I'd go off, and I'm a major nerd, and I'd dig into stuff, and I'd come back, and I'd throw it back to my colleagues, and then they give it back to me too in spades. And it's a fantastically inspiring place, and we still have these young bucks going through these. I was actually, I'll be very pleased to say, Tim, young Jonathan, our colleague Jonathan, he's just got a job at Wessex Archaeology. And you see these guys come through, and girls, and almost always they go off in a different direction eventually to spread their wings, and it's really inspiring. And it has this magic about the place, this vibe, which does push people on or push people out sometimes to think, well, this isn't for me. I'll try something different. And I've seen the cruel side of it as well as the good side of it.
Yeah.
Because if you have people pushing your buttons all day long, when we're much busier than we are now, and eventually something's going to give. And it takes a very special type of character, someone like Robey One, or I hesitantly say myself, not to blow on and eventually tell a customer where we'd quite like them to go.
Right. That's a common trend in any kind of public work, I know. But
Absolutely.
I've done that kind of work. I get it. But even with what's going on there now, it's a place I would love to work, to learn as much as anything. And actually it doesn't even have to be there. Part of and you talk about the dumbing down, and with the reason most people go to England or to the British Isles is heritage. They're looking for history and the buildings and the sites, or people like me, prehistory, even more than history. Or where their families came from. Most of us came either from the British Isles or Germany, as far as original people over here. And I think you'll hurt your tourism if you get rid of too much of the heritage. But I'm wondering, how do you see, and I'm not meaning to change the subject, but you both know I kind of bounce around. How do you see that whole landscape? You've got Wiltshire, the Salisbury Plain, which is, in my understanding, that was basically a savanna, even in Neolithic times. Is that true? Okay. And all this that seems to be connected all over. I mean, not just within the lines of the Stonehenge or the Stonehenge monument, which has got Durrington Wall and Woodhenge and all that. And I wish they would have left the Durrington Wall's excavated, so when I went to see it, I could see what they'd found. But how does it all work together? How does it? And do you think that the people at the top with the spirituality chain, the religious chain, believed it or knew that it was necessary? And how do you think the people, for the most part, felt? And I know this is hard to prove anything, but I'm interested in your thoughts.
You want to say something, Matt? No, you're giving it to me. Okay. We know quite a lot about religion amongst hunter-gatherer people. So if we go back into the Upper Paleolithic and the Mesolithic, we know quite a lot about, or we can infer quite a lot about their religion. Because obviously what we know is sorry, I've got mozzies. What we know is about modern hunter-gatherer, 20th century hunter-gatherer populations that were recorded by anthropologists.
Right.
We can go back and we can say similar society, similar organization, looks like might have a similar religion, and the religion that we have from that is one in which you have a landscape populated with spirits, no gods necessarily.
Right.
Most modern societies, most modern hunter-gatherer societies do have gods.
Okay.
But that's 10,000 years down the line.
Right.
But they can borrow them from. They often have borrowed them from agricultural peoples as well. But sometimes they've developed their own. But mostly it's a spirit world that's out there. That has existed in long before humans. And so you have to learn to interact with that world. Now that's the one end of the scale. At the other end of the scale is the sort of pantheons of gods that we get in Egypt and even in Rome. And we know that in the Iron Age here, by the time the Romans come here, there's already a well-established pantheon of gods.
Right.
And you deal with gods in a slightly different way to the way you deal with the spirit world. Because
Okay.
with the spirit world, you can make deals. With gods, you just hope for the best. You know, you pray and you hope for the best.
Right.
And it's a very different kind of religion. And by that, also tend to have full-time priests who are there to interpret the words of the gods.
Okay.
And it's in a way, you've got to, if you look at it with a sort of humanist perspective, you've got to say, did the priests come in there and put themselves between people and the spirit world and say, these spirits are extra special, and the only way you're going to get to them is through us.
Right.
So you've got to deal with us, and we'll deal with the gods.
Right.
And suddenly you've got organized religion, and that kind of happens sometime between the Neolithic and the beginning of the Neolithic and the Iron Age, which leaves us with the late Neolithic or the middle and late Neolithic and the Bronze Age. And Stonehenge is smack in the middle.
Right.
So where are we along that scale? What's happened? Have we got gods? Have we got a couple of gods? Have we got a couple of very important spirits who aren't quite gods yet? Have we got priests? Or have we got part-time practitioners, shamans and things like that? We're somewhere on that line. And
Right.
you know, you just make your choice. I made the choice for the book. I said, this is how it's going to be. This is where I'm going to draw the line. But you know, you could shift it either way. You could have a sun god and a moon god and a river god and a few other things thrown in there, and they could all be organized. You could have a small number of full-time priests and a large number of shamans who did day-to-day stuff.
Right.
Or you could have, you know, a much less organized, much less structured religion. I think we're seeing the beginnings of structure of religion because we're getting, with the groupware pottery at least, if not before, you're suddenly getting a plethora of these really high.
You've frozen up, Tim.
Sorry?
You
Sorry?
froze up there.
You
Oh,
You
okay.
froze up for a bit. Yeah, it keeps happening.
Yeah. These really high input religious projects and are do kind of suggest that there's quite a strong, as you've said earlier, a sort of a centralized or a widespread, very religious organization which is central to people's lives.
Right.
Whether the priesthood is organized or not, whether the canon is organized or not, doesn't matter. The point is that it's very to people that they follow the local religious beliefs, and the local religious beliefs tend to have become very widespread, and that's why we get this unity of circular monuments and stone circles and henge monuments and things like that all across the country.
Mhm.
But everyone's different.
Right.
The clue is, you know, if they had a highly organized religion that was being spread by missionaries going to other societies and saying, this is the new religion, you've got to follow it, you know, then everybody would be doing very much the same thing, and the stone circles would all look alike. There might be different sizes, but they'd have the same features in the same sequence, because there was a fixed canon, there was a fixed way to celebrate your religion.
Right.
And that kind of tends to happen with gods and religion. So this is why I think we're still dealing with spirits and the spirit world. We're dealing with, everybody has their local spirits.
Whoops.
Magic come in, which gives you a machine, gives you a system.
Tim? Yeah,
And
that sounds like a code or something. Are you
so
that last piece we got as far as with gods it would be more organized, but you just as you got into that last bit of explanation, you basically froze, and then we got a sound here and there, or part of a
Oh, it
syllable.
did the sound as well, did it? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry
Um,
about that.
yeah, that's okay. No, all I'm saying is that if you had a religion with a fixed priesthood that was being spread by an organization like the Druids, for example,
Mhm.
then your religious centers would all tend to look the same. They'd look like churches. Churches are not all the same, but
Right.
they are recognizable, loads and loads of features in the same sequence within them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas if you look at henge monuments and stone circles and things, every single one is different. A lot of them have the same elements. A lot of them have a cove. A lot of them have at least one large standing stone. They have circles within circles. They have most of them have a ditch and a bank as a boundary. So they have like, if you like, I like to call it the temple precinct.
Right.
They have these basic features, but they all arrange them differently, and that means that what they're actually doing is different. Now, it could be that each site has a different purpose, or it could be that in each little area, people do things differently because they've got their own spirits. It's a localized, it's a national concept with a localized activity focus or organization. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
And that's where I think we are. I think we're the late spirits. Maybe the first things like the sun, the sun spirits are turning into sun gods, and it's just starting to all happen. It happens through the Bronze Age.
Okay.
Now the interesting thing was that we talked about the Beaker folk and everything earlier. Is that they are just starting to come into Britain, and they are new people. When I first went to university, we were taught that they were thought to be a different people, and there've been all these over the years. There've been all these measurements of crania and things like that, but now we kind of in archaeology we kind of turned our back on that, and we realized that there was so much variation that you couldn't really prove anything that way, and so we're now starting to look at these Beaker folk as being the original. We're going away from mass migrations of people and going into the idea that ideas diffuse through and people stay the same.
Right.
And we're all within that range of generally European skull shape that it's just a matter of variation and local breeding units and things like that. And of course, what's happened in the last 10 years or so is that's all started to turn right back on its head again to what it was in the 60s and 50s with DNA. And now we know that, the Neolithic population who came in here were different to the hunter-gatherer population who lived here before.
Right.
And the Beaker people who came in here before were genetically different and looked different to the Neolithic people who were here before. And as Matt said, they come in and they suddenly all the graves that there's important individual graves of the Bronze Age, the round barrows, are all with the new people, and they are all showing 90% genetic traits of the new group. So this is the new people who come in, establish themselves as the elite, and they don't mix that much.
Oh.
They're not mixing tremendously. There's always some admixture of but as they understand the DNA at the moment, it looks like they're not mixing much. So on the surface, it looks like a replacement of population. It's not a replacement of population because the burials only deal with about 5%, 10% of the population at the most.
Right.
The other 90% could all be the old Neolithic population who are now the underlings. That's basically what you were saying, wasn't it, Matt? It's very much like the Norman conquest over again, except it takes place over a much longer period of time. These people didn't come in as an army. The frequency of round barrows and the Beaker people starts around about 2,400, and there are very few early graves, and then there's more, and then there's more until you get to about 2,000, and there's loads of them.
Right.
So it looks like it's a slower migration of people. It starts with a few people like the Amesbury Archer. The word gets back, and more people come in, and as they get, they'll get to a point where there are so many of them that they can actually just intermarry with themselves, and form that elite over the top of everybody else.
Okay.
That's what the next book's about, by the way.
Excellent. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear you're writing it.
It takes the next step on. But yeah, so there is a change. There's a changeover coming, and the other interesting thing that happens at this point, this change point, is that you stop getting henges, or at least you stop getting big henges, and you stop getting big stone circles. Because if you go down into the West Country, and the Lake District and a few places like that, you've got the stone circles, small stone circles, local stone circles, with waist-high stones, 15 yards across, 9 maidens. How many 9 maidens are there in this country?
Right.
Or the dancers, or the merry maidens, or whatever you want to call it. These are small circles that could be put up by a very small community.
And they're newer than the larger circles.
And they go on into the Bronze Age.
Right. Okay.
So, and the way I see it, and I've got no proof of this at all. This is in my head, the way I see it is those are signs of the old religion carrying on.
Okay.
This is people are still doing it and doing the stone circle thing, but the new Bronze Age people have moved beyond that.
Okay.
And the stone circles, the big ones, are still used. Stonehenge is still there because it's at the center of the universe. And Avebury is still there for whatever reason. I think it's the place of balance, but it doesn't matter. Whatever reason, these big ones are still in use for a while, and Stonehenge carries on longer than most of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the religion is changing, and what's happening is that a political elite has come in. Now, that political elite might also be a religious elite. I think it's highly likely.
Right.
We don't know that, but that whole changeover, it's a fascinating period, absolutely fascinating, and I just love the fact that in my one career, it's flipped polarity twice, and we're back where we were when I was a teenager, and I think that's wonderful.
I do too.
Maybe it's all going in cycles. So it's a cycle. The way that science moves forward is cyclic rather than a series of stepped equilibria, isn't it?
Oh, that makes sense.
I'll shut up now.
You never know where you are with Stonehenge, do you, buddy? Because you think you know where you stand, you think you understand the subject, and then boom, someone comes up with a new theory, someone comes up with a new book, some piece of isotope analysis, something happens, some geophys, and you're just like, oh, okay, and you have to reinvestigate. There was that story about Tim would be well aware of this before, William, but the story about the roof on Stonehenge popped up again on the Daily Mail, and William shared it to me.
I sent you that. Yep, and assumed I didn't even read all of it. I just read the titles and stuff and figured it was rubbish. But
it's like, well, no, it isn't. Well, maybe it isn't. It is, but it isn't. But it's one of those things that, just as Tim was saying, it's cyclic. It turns up every few years.
Okay.
And the story will come back around again with the Daily Mail. I think it was 2 weeks ago, Tim. They ran the story of
That's right, yeah.
And I've had discussions with various people about drip furrows and stuff like that. So if Stonehenge did have a roof, would it have had a drip furrow that would be relevant that we could see now? What do you reckon, archaeology, Tim?
Well, I think almost certainly. I mean, look at the houses at the Neolithic houses at the visitor centre. They've all developed drip furrows.
Yeah, and they've only been there what 4 years, something like 5 years, something along
Yeah.
that, not that long. And they've
So
very distinctive.
you put a roof area that's 10 times as much as that, you're going to get 10 times as much water running off.
Yeah.
There should be a drip furrow. It's I've seen it with medieval buildings where you get a pile of stones and literally, real peasant dwellings. You get a pile of stones and you're really not sure whether you've got a wall or not, because it's just stuck together with mud, and the mud's long gone or looks exactly like all the other mud. So what you've effectively got is a bunch of stones that seem to have been collected together. Are they just a collection of stones, or are they the remains of a wall? And the giveaway is always, if you've got a drip line,
Yep.
you've got a drip furrow along the side or a drip line, there was a roof over it, so this is a building.
Yeah.
And if the two are parallel, and I've had 3 or 4 buildings where that has literally been the deciding factor.
Wow.
Got the drip. There's no
That
sign
makes
of it at
sense.
Stonehenge. Interestingly, there's no sign of it at any of the other sites either. The sanctuary and the Woodhenge and Durrington Walls, Marden, they were all sites that were put forward as roof sites by Pickett, and I forget who the other guy was who was doing it separately. But in the 50s and 60s, that became the popular way of viewing the wooden sites, and I still like it. But if I think about it honestly, I've got to say there are no drip lines anywhere.
Mhm. Well, and if these places were set up to have something to do with astronomy and tracking seasons, and knowing that okay, the daylight's coming, we're not going to freeze and starve to death, it wouldn't seem like you'd want a roof on it, because then you couldn't see the astronomy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
But if you want to make a quick buck, William, the secret has always been a theory of Stonehenge that appears plausible at first paragraphs reading, and then doesn't hold up very long. And you'll get in these days of social media, you'll probably get 1,000 shares or whatever it is, and off you go, viral you are. And
maybe that's how I'll finance my next trip to Stonehenge.
Well, my cousin, in fact, my second cousin works at Stonehenge as one of the drivers of the buses, and he took an image of Stonehenge a couple of years ago now, and he caught a double rainbow over the stones.
Oh, nice!
Beautiful, wonderful image that he just captured with his iPhone, and shared it to social media for my employees or whatever, and I think it's had like 1.5 million views or something like that.
Wow.
And he had no
That's
idea.
amazing. I remember the picture.
Yeah, and he had no idea
It was
of
brilliant.
the relative value of what he had in some way. So you almost become a little bit almost you just by the fact that you're there every day. And don't get me wrong, I've never been unappreciative of the fact that I'm there every day. Right. But you snap a picture and not think much of it, and you might put it up on one of the social media groups or something like that. Before you know, you're like, oh, hang on, and then you've got to be very careful, because if you do put something on social media, then anyone can just click up and save your photo and
say it's theirs.
Yeah, you've got to be very careful. I've had a couple of images or ideas I've had in the past that I've sort of presented, and I thought, hang on, if I do actually hand this over to you, I've lost all actual intellectual rights to this moment that only I saw. And
copywriting and watermarking photos, and I mean, I understand there are ways of helping to protect, but I'm not sure.
It's difficult because the security team, I don't know if I told you about this, William, I probably did, but last year, while we were all closed up, the security guys, a couple of them, got some fantastic footage of some very unusual things happening over Stonehenge, sort of UFO-y-esque type images. And
is this an update on this?
Oh,
Is this an update on that?
I can give you an update if you want, Robey one, but
Oh yeah,
Definitely.
effectively. Okay, so here's the update on that. So
Go ahead and put the foundation and the update, because
okay, so the foundation is such that June last year, maybe even a bit earlier than that, two of our very well known and trusted and loved security guards at 5 o'clock in the morning in midsummer, so it was actually light, recorded some fairly fantastic footage of something over Stonehenge, which is very hard to identify and would, without any doubt, under any general classification, would be considered a UFO over Stonehenge. And what made this brilliant and very interesting was the fact that we had two security guards who both had their phones going from different points of the monument, recording it. So I can't use their names, but after much persuasion, and it took a lot, I managed to convince one of the guys to share his video with me, which is fairly and very sweary and shaky, but has undisputably some very interesting footage on it. But the other chap was less keen to share it with me, and understandably, because he had the better share of the footage, and it was quite powerful. And yeah, so I've got about 6 minutes, maybe that's an exaggeration, 5 minutes or so of footage from two independent sources of a unidentified flying object over Stonehenge. And I've been sat on this footage for a while because it took me a while for the guys to convince the guys to let me have the footage, and then I wanted to authenticate it. So I wanted to say that this isn't faked. This isn't. I can't see how they've done this. And the brilliant thing about these guys' footage is that you can hear their reactions on either side of the recording. So I have one chap. His recording is about 30 seconds before the other guys. And the other chaps is very, very distinct and steady and continues for a lot longer. And I'm not, Tim, have you seen these bits and pieces?
I've seen the one. I've seen the unsteady one. I never saw the other one, which is why I was interested.
The other one, and I've taken it back home and I've put it onto a big screen and I've analysed it, and it is insanely interesting. My first thought when I saw it, the first fuzzy footage, I thought, oh, it's a weather balloon. And we're very close to a military test zone at Stonehenge as well, so could be anything.
right.
But the second set of footage I was given is unmistakably and very interestingly very odd. I've never seen a shape like it. It keeps changing shape and it morphs around the sky and it moves in unusual ways and it's completely silent. And it's very odd. But we're right next to a military test zone. So I'm struck by the story of my very good friend Peter's father. He's a fencer, a gate maker. And he used to tell me stories about making a series of, he had a contract to make gates near Boston Down 40 years ago, or maybe more than that. And he kept on seeing these weird objects in the sky. And it was the Harrier jump jet. It was the test bits and pieces for the Vottle Harrier jump jet. So who's to say? And
Our stealth jets.
It's probably quite likely that there's some kind of weird stealthy morphing kind of project that's happening at the moment over there. But it really is very strange to watch. And what is an unidentified flying object if it isn't something that's unidentified and flying and is an object? And it ticks all of those. And it's especially interesting with the recent declassification of bits and pieces from your side of the pond, William. And there's been a sort of more open honesty with that side of things. But don't get me wrong, I'm neither pro or against aliens. I've seen some very strange things in the sky. Our sort of mutual friend Tina Marie from KCOR, I'd love her to see the footage. And I've spoken to her a couple of times. So I've kind of been trying to clear it with the guys so that she can see it. Because
I would love to see it too, because you did tell me about it, but I hadn't heard how far you got with it. But you couldn't share it with me.
Yeah, like Tim says, to sort of tie the story up. Talking to Frog the other day, and Frog's got a new book coming out, Supernatural Salisbury, to follow on from his Haunted Salisbury book, which is a fantastic book. And he sort of asked me that we're working together a little bit on the last chapter, which is going to be on UFOs around, with sort of, because of that. I'm not a UFOologist, but there's a lot of weird stuff that happens around this area, and I've got that footage, and the guys are willing to share it now, which has been.
Fantastic.
They were very nervous about sharing it before because they're worried they're going to get somebody knock on the door and say, "Hey, you shouldn't be showing this sunshine," because the Men in Black are a real thing in not like the Hollywood style, but there are people who will tell you that you can't say what you're seeing.
That's happened to. I've heard first-hand stories about that happening. So.
Yeah, ditto William. I know people who have been told. I mean, I won't say too much about it, but I was looking into with the Fish and History Society a few years ago. We were looking into nuclear shelters and that sort of thing, and I got told to stop looking. Basically, I got told to, okay, that's enough.
Wow.
So I don't know what you mean. Yeah, but they're obviously, Sorry, Tim, I'm waffling on, buddy.
No. I was fascinated. I'd like to see what comes out of that, and I'd love to see the other footage myself. So maybe one day.
Be very happy to share it with you, and I do have permission to do that now. But yeah, I'm working with definitely in Frog's new book. There will be stills and bits and pieces from it, and but yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because I mean, whenever you see something like that, the moment you say you've seen something, you almost consider a fruit loop instantaneously. In this modern era, where people are carrying around phones of really decent quality, let's face it,
you're right.
My phone records stonkingly good quality. When I think about it, I look at some of my images of Stonehenge where I've just picked up my phone and gone, "Oh, that's pretty." Put it back on my computer, and you're like, "Wow!" So yeah, that's kind of the chaps who we both know well, Tim. They're trustworthy souls. It's not somebody who's just turned up and we've never met before. These guys worked there for years and years and years.
Definitely, that's fascinating. Now, of course, if that really goes public, you'll have more people coming in saying, "See the connection with UFOs that proves it."
Yeah,
because they already talk about, and so many of these ancient sites and the pyramids, even in all of this. Oh, you see all the UFOs around them and everything else, and and I have seen something. I was in high school and I saw a UFO. It was big and round and lots of multicolored lights, and it did weird things and went down behind a hill that I later learned is supposed to be a good Bigfoot area. But I don't know what it was. It was unidentified. I don't know if it was something from the government. I don't know if it was interdimensional or extraterrestrial or what, and if what the little I understand of quantum theory and such says there are parallel universes. Could it be something like that? And could it be a figment of my imagination? Well, there were two of us. We weren't drinking. We weren't doing drugs, so it's probably not a figment of our imagination. But
it might be that everybody you know is a figment of your imagination anyway. So
that's true. Yeah, I think that's one of the new theories
of ourselves.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. In which case, you'll get correlation between one imagination and the other. I remember seeing something. It was far less convincing, but when I was a teenager in Zimbabwe, we saw for about 6 months we saw a UFO. Never figured out what it was. It was just a light, we used to get military helicopters and things like that, and it wasn't one of them.
Mhm.
It didn't behave like an aircraft, and this is long before drones and things like that. So
Right.
we're talking about sort of early 70s, and this used to sort of come up over the horizon, pretty much the same place. It wasn't always exactly the same place. It come up over the horizon, and then it would stop and hover at about the same level. And we knew it was the same level because you could see it from the back veranda of my block of flats. And there was a tree, and it was sort of hovered just above the widest point of the tree, and a couple of degrees to the left. And it would stay there for about 3 or 4 minutes,
Mhm.
and then it would appear to have been coming towards us, and then it would stop. Didn't get bigger, so it seemed to have stopped coming towards us, and then suddenly it would just go whoosh and disappear off at a high rate of knots. And it did the same thing, not every night, but most nights, over a period of about 6 months, and then
Amazing.
never saw it again.
Oh, that's fantastic.
What was it? It was. I mean, I don't think it was a flying saucer, but I do think that it was something very odd.
Right.
Um,
And there was a lot of
probably-
military development at that point too, I think.
well, yeah, we had a war going on then, so
Yeah.
there was quite a bit on.
Yeah. I would be interesting another time just to hear about your experiences growing up in Africa. I mean, that's a whole nother fascinating event, I think.
Yeah, it was a different way of life, but not so not so different, but it was, yeah, it turned you into a different kind of person, and it's quite interesting. I'm still with the internet and everything. I'm actually back in touch with a lot of kids from school who are
good.
like myself, no longer kids. And it is quite strange that we still connect at a level which is quite different to the way I connect to English people, despite the fact that I've been here 35 years. It's we still have that core of experience together,
Mhm.
which very few other people have. And it culminated in the war, and most of us did military service, and we all share that experience. And a couple of us didn't enjoy the military service very much, and a couple of people ducked out of it, and I can relate to that as well. And a couple of those guys are some of my best friends as well.
Yeah.
It was a very different kind of society to this one.
Right.
Not all good, but
Yeah.
it did make you very independent, I think.
Okay. Wow.
I used to love Tim's stories about hitchhiking. Tim used to tell me about his hitchhiking tales in his youth across Africa. I mean, I was lucky enough to spend some time out in Africa, in actually Zimbabwe, in fact. So I would often pick Tim's brains about various Zimbo tales and all that sort of stuff, because Zimbabwe has a fantastic archaeological history itself. We have Great Zimbabwe. I spent some time at a place called Tisindi Ruins. And it's just absolutely teeming with history, and it's a fantastically inspiring country in itself. I love my time out in Zims, and I used to spend a lot of time picking Tim's brain about your times out there, buddy. But it's that said, though, I mean, I'll be honest. Probably one of the worst days of my life was in Zimbabwe, as well as some of the best times of my life were in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
It's a place of contrasts, to be honest with you. But
Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, I'm thinking of a glass of wine or a pint or a glass of whiskey and sitting around and picking your two brains and giving stories. I think that would be a fun evening. So,
yeah.
let's see, we've been going a little over an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. Does anybody out there have questions? There's one David Cook sent a long time ago. Sorry, David, but here it is.
How do you feel when we reduce the knowledge of our ancestors? Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I guess we do use our knowledge of our ancestors, don't we? In the monuments we create now, I think it's echoed in almost everything we create. Well, maybe sadly not in some architecture. They forget the lessons our ancestors learned. But yeah, I don't know. We're standing on the shoulder of giants, aren't we?
We're in a different place. I mean, I was just talking just now about Zimbabwe, Rhodesia being a different society to this one. Nothing like the kind of difference between Neolithic society and the one that we live in. And can we use some of their ideas? Yeah, probably we could use some of their ideas on conservation and how the way we relate to the natural world. But the problem is that we don't actually know what they were. We know about their technology. We can recognize their technology. We can work with their technology. But it's pointless because our technology has superseded that. So we can actually we can actually do these things so much more easily. It doesn't mean that we can't learn from them and say they did something that in a way that was more conservationist, better use of resources, natural resources, and there's no reason why we can't learn that kind of lesson from them. But straight technology, I think we probably will never go back to using stone tools,
Yeah.
Or bronze tools or anything like that, because iron is just so much better, and to be honest, probably more common. Yeah, so I would say that there's a limit to what we can use of the knowledge, and there's a limit to what we actually know of their knowledge.
Right. I would think it's more of the more we understand and know of their knowledge, the more we can, or their technology, the more we can understand them as a culture and how they did the things that they left behind for us. But we've had so many, even if the knowledge was going to be like a stepping stone from Stonehenge, you get the ability to build larger stone houses or something. There are so many gaps in history where most of knowledge has gone backwards or disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be continuous.
Yeah.
Well, it's the Stonehenge thing is a case in point. Stonehenge was the end of the sequence of building, and it was the pinnacle, if you like. They shaped all the stones. They did the lintels. They had joints like carpentry joints. There are multiple layers, and the layers are different within the structure. They're using stones which are not local, which is almost unheard of anywhere else in the religion.
Right.
And the amount of effort that went into playing with those stones and creating Stonehenge was absolutely enormous. And then nothing happened. Now, it could be that that's because the Bronze Age came about, because the Beaker people came in, and once they took command, they weren't interested in building new stones. Or it could be, and my favourite has always been that the guys that built Stonehenge, the actual masons, as it were, spread out afterwards, and wherever they went to live, they just said, whatever you do, don't do one of these. It's just so much work. You have no idea how hard it is.
Yes.
Just put your rocks up, that's fine. Just they work just as well as they are. That's a step backwards, or is it?
Right.
Have they just taken a step too far in the first place? We love Stonehenge, but Was it in actual fact a step too far, a step further than they needed to go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good point, Tim. I like that. I like that. But
that is a good point. And I don't know if we'll ever know, but
No.
it's I don't know. Excuse me, I get lost in thought and trying to put together the sentence. But it's a fascinating period of time, and when I love to explore as much as I can when I'm over there. I don't go to see Buckingham Palace. I go to see as many of the mounds and ancient sites as I possibly can, and see if I can tune into them at all. And I don't know, it just feels like home. But, well, I don't see anybody else's questions. I will go ahead and end this episode. Thank you, everybody, for coming. First of all, though, people need to know how to get a hold of you guys, your books, your blogs, your websites, your whatever. And what should I? Let me see. I tried to do one. Let me see. Tim, can you see this? Whoops. Let me put it up here. Does that look like it'll get to your? I copied this off the address of your blog.
I think that takes you to the first page.
Okay, and from there they can get your book and everything else, I believe, right?
They can't actually buy the book from there, no, but they can. It'll take them to. There are links to the Amazon
Right. That's what I mean. There's a link.
everyone buy Tim's book. It's fantastic. Buy
It
Tim's
is.
book. It's awesome.
And the blogs are incredible. So, but they can, going to that page, they can find the links to get to everything else they need. Is that right?
Yes, they should be able to. And if they can't now, they will within a day or two, because I'll make sure that they're there.
Okay.
But yeah, the links to the book and links to the Facebook page and things like that are there.
Okay, great. And
everything to do with me, William, can be found on timezoneproductions.com.
Oops, I did it wrong. Okay. So,
it's okay. Time Zone Tours, although Time Zone Tours are still functioning, we have a new wonderful all-singing website called timezoneproductions.com, which Time Zone Tours and everyone else is included in. We've got the History Festival happening at the end of August.
Which I wish I could go to.
Well, we wish you could be there, my friend. We've got lots and lots happening there. So the Lake Down History Hike is happening. Ruby's talking. Frog's got stuff doing. We've got book launches. That's us. Yeah, check us out. We've got loads of stuff happening on the website at the moment. And by that I mean Frog and Ruby and myself as a team. We've got absolutely tons happening. I've been working for the last couple of years, as I told you, on the Lake Down History Hike. And that is all go. So
excellent.
So the first we're going to be running a couple of minor tours for beaters, and then on August bank holiday weekend, the first full Lake Down History Hike will happen, and it will be running from then and forevermore.
So when are you going to have it in a book?
Oh, that's an interesting point, because there's been so much work that's gone into this. There's huge amount of research. There's going to be a talk first that'll be happening soon, as well as the walk, and then eventually a book. I'm sure will come from it.
Well, the writer in residence at Stonehenge should get a book out with this.
Well, it's been I've been COVIDed a little bit, so my book got slightly. I do have a copy myself, and I can send you a photocopy. I don't know. It's all been very weird. But William, thank you so much for having me on. It's been fun again.
Yeah.
Oh, I love having you guys on, and this has been great. So thank you all for watching, and
thanks
we'll
very much,
see you
William.
soon.
And Matt, let me know what's going on about the